And I know we're running a half hour early today, but this is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. And I'm going to bring our esteemed guest, Mark Boatwright Frost, in shortly here for a discussion on security, part two. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hey Rob, how you doing?
Good. And yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a crazy few days. I don't know if you knew that I was down with hay fever for 3 or 4 days, and then Terry is down with migraine. Has been down with migraine for 2 days, and is coming back today. Kind of starting to come back today.
I,
And so security is an interesting thing. The way we think about security is interesting for us right now.
yeah, I did not know about your hay fever. Stephanie had informed me about Terry's migraines, and yeah, no, I try to avoid that like the plague, like anyone would, and
Yeah,
I know you suffered for a number of years, so
the
well,
minute I saw the symptoms, I went, "Oh God, I know what this is."
well, you know, hopefully she's quick on the mend, and hopefully, you both are getting better.
Yeah, actually, I'm able to breathe again. Last night was the first night I slept through the entire night since Thursday last week. So it's all coming back, but I've still been busy, still trying to get everything done. And as we know, Mr. Marwan is off making big things happen today,
Yes,
and we talk about it, unfortunately, folks. But there are things that might be announced in the near future.
exactly. So you end up with my smiling face for 2 weeks in a row. Look at this. We go
Yep,
a year and you only get me 3 times, and now you got me 2 weeks in a row.
and there we go. And it's all talking about security.
Yep.
And as you probably got last week, we're not talking about security in the way that you usually think about security. And Rob and I actually talked yesterday because I knew he was going to be on today, and we changed what we're going to talk about. So I might be stumbling a little bit here because I'm kind of rethinking the whole thing as we go.
Mhm.
What had been planned will better be discussed with Marwan and Rob um, about conflict versus cooperation and how that appears in our culture. Because without cooperation, we have conflict, and that is what our society pushes us toward, which creates a need for security.
Mhm.
So, there's the Celtic myth about the worm Orboros, which is the dragon or the snake eating its own tail.
Yes.
And this is how our society works. We are the snake eating our own tail, and we keep doing the same things over and over and over again, and praying for a different outcome.
That's insanity, though, isn't it?
It is the absolute definition of it.
Yep.
So today I want to talk about communication, which is just the same kind of worm trap that we are in. Um, I'm a history buff, okay, and I've studied a fair amount of history. And one of the things I always admire about the French is their ability, and I'm not painting all French people. I'm just talking historically and in recent times. The French uh, national approach to everything must be French, and that got me thinking about everything else. French is a national language. I have heard rumors. I do not know this, that they basically give you a lot of attitude and problems if you don't try at least attempt to speak French there. And to some degree, I tend to agree with it because if you're not trying to understand their culture, you're not going to appreciate it. So what's the point? And I absolutely have experienced the ugly American in lots of different places and dealt lots of different ways. But should a language, should communication be forced into a box?
I you look at our own country, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You talk
Oh,
about
and I do.
you do. I mean, our primary language in this country is English.
It's American, but okay,
Well,
we'll call it English.
I know it's an American offshoot of the language,
Right.
but by the same token, we have so many different cultures here. You have to become fluent or offer your information in multiple languages so that
Mhm.
they can understand it. So I would say it can't just be in one box. We have to be able to communicate multiple ways because
Yep.
how do you get your point across? I mean, and I may not be able to speak the language, but maybe I have some rudimentary if it's a sign or if it's, I can hand you something so you can understand what I'm trying to say,
Mhm.
you know. And now the technology with phones and stuff, you can get things translated for you.
Sort of. Yeah. I
Sort of.
actually I actually use Google Translate a lot.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say it's 100% perfect because none of it is, it's technology,
Yeah, it is
but
it is it is challenging in some ways.
at least it gives us a groundwork.
It does. So there's a movie. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Tortilla Soup, which is the MGM remake of Eat, Drink, Man, and Woman.
I have not, but,
Okay, it's a comedy with Hector Elizondo,
okay,
who's a father of three daughters, and he's a chef whose wife recently died, and he's raising his daughters.
okay,
Um, and the youngest daughter was talking to her boyfriend about how many languages he spoke, and he's from Brazil, and he spoke like 5 or 6 languages, French, of course, Portuguese, Spanish. And she goes, "So what do you call it?" And he says, "A polyglot." It says, "I'm bilingual. I'm bilingual. I speak, American and bad Spanish, and sometimes together."
mhm.
And it says, what's so what do you call somebody who speaks only one language? And he goes, "American."
That is a very true statement. I mean, I know, I mean, I'm ashamed to say I know, but I do know plenty of people that think that if you're here, you should speak American, you
And
know?
English is a primary language.
Yes,
It is,
it is.
but it shouldn't be the only language you speak. And to my shame, I actually used to speak fairly fluent Spanish. But like any other muscle, you have to practice and use it in order to maintain it.
See, where I grew up, there was not a need at the time, and I mean, I took French when I was in high school, and I took it for 2 years and could speak some of it, but and that served me well when going into Canada with
Hmm.
the Canadians and stuff, because over on from Detroit, you get into Ontario, you can go up to Montreal, into Quebec, and stuff like that. Um,
We
but again, I'm not fluent in it, and I'm not fluent in it now. I mean, it's something that I haven't done in 30 years.
I
Easy.
grew up. I grew up working in kitchens, in restaurants,
Hmm.
in California, in Southern
Yeah.
California. So speaking Spanish as a second language, and wasn't even that good, but fairly fluently, was a necessity, and it made me a lot of good friends.
Hmm.
And it's strangely enough, I was one of the few people in the kitchen that bothered to learn.
Well, to me, that that you bothered to learn is awesome. But I mean, I've been to Southern California, I've been, to Texas, things like that. And if I lived there now and I had to work, it would behoove me to be able to speak Spanish
Mhm.
besides English, so that I mean that I could communicate, because how do how do I get any kind of work done or communicate, or they communicate with me and say, hey, I mean, to that extent now, even as I'm seeing in construction up here over the last decade, you really do have to learn another language, because I mean, I can tell you I was out on a job site, and this was about 10 years ago, and they send out a crew to sheetrock the house. There are eight Latino people, and only one of them speaks English, and it's not very clear English. So you've got one person that you can communicate with when you're trying to get things done.
Mhm.
and he can't fully understand what you're trying to say to him. I felt at a complete disadvantage because I can't speak to you. I can draw you a picture, I can point, I can do all the things I can try to do to talk to you, but your English is not, your understanding of English is not clearly as good as, so we can communicate. And my understanding of Spanish is nil. So,
So yeah, learning Spanish, and it actually put me in good stead a little later on when I was production manager of a glass plant in San Francisco.
mhm,
We made high end tabletops in marble and glass for the Nob Hill crowd and such like that, and a lot of the art shops and such. Our entire staff in the shop was a variety of Latinos, and each one of them with a slightly different dialect, which actually drove my ear crazy. Everything from Mexican, Salvadorian, Colombian,
mhm.
um, Honduran. Anyway, we had a variety of people in there with different Latin backgrounds, and they all talked to each other, sort of, and even they had trouble talking to each other because of the dialects.
I've seen that where we are now. A friend of
Yeah,
ours, her, she came from California. She speaks her version of Spanish. Her ex-husband speaks a different version of Spanish, but they can understand each other. And then another person that was involved with us came from Puerto Rico, which speaks a completely different dialect.
yeah,
So some words are not the same, some words are the same. So,
yeah. And in Puerto Rico, which is part of the Caribbean, you end up with um, Creole
yeah,
in the mix. So their version of Spanish is heavily flavored with French
yeah.
and the French Creole background of it. And then you throw Brazil, which speaks Portuguese,
Hmm.
which is a lot like Spanish, but not.
Hmm.
And I wonder if the problems that Brazil and Argentina always have with each other are because they speak close but not quite the same language.
It could be.
So it's interesting. Oh, by the way, in the shop we also had two Vietnamese and a Chinese person. So it made communications, and it was my job to get everybody on the same page. So
Yeah.
I became very adept at understanding the issues with communication. But that brings us back to the point of why communication comes with security. Do you think we would be more secure if we had more a clear understanding of each other?
I think so. I
So
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I would say yes, a clearer understanding of each other would help because even just me talking to you, if I say something one way and you take it a different way than the way I said it, and I mean, I know I can be deadpan sarcastic and people just don't get it. It's like, no, I'm not mad at you. It's just this is who I am. So yes, I think security wise, if we could understand each other better, which means getting to know each other,
Hmm.
yes, your security would be improved.
Okay, so I want to start off by saying that I in no way, shape, or form am recommending English as a primary language to everybody on the planet,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you why in a second. I am not suggesting a single language for the planet based on any language because our languages have become part of our nationalist culture. And they, in and of themselves, create as much of the problem as they would solve. Adopting anyone's language would be unfair to a great many people. I do not have a solution to this, but this is the part of the thing that where there's a big hole in the puzzle that we need smart people to come in, or even, I mean, people who don't may not even know they're smart will come in and ask a question that'll lead us to an answer. I do not have an answer for this, but I do want to point out something. I'm going to tell a personal story. I I have never passed an English 101 class in college level, and yet I am published. I am considered well spoken. I write for a living, and people seem to think that what I write is clear. And then one day, a guy named Dan Adams who was a former English student or an English teacher, said, Mark, what you have to understand is English teachers lie to you. They've been lying to you all of your life. And I went, well, why is that? And he says, they're telling you there are rules to English. There are no rules. There are guidelines. English is a living language. It changes all the time.
Mhm.
So to make you write English in a specific way is based on a lie. They're trying to mold you in a certain way. Now, there's a strength to this and to this fallacy in that if we all can come together and agree that this is the language to speak in this way and this is what it means as we go. But that's not what we do when we teach that, because English teachers don't even understand mostly that they're telling a lie. They're telling you these rules for writing, but they're not focusing on the reason and the core behind them that helps you communicate. Communication is as much about intent as it is about words. And it's about being able to listen and see the other person. And you just said recently, just a few minutes ago, that, your sarcasm is often misunderstood by people who don't know you and don't recognize it. That is true of everything we do with words. You are seeing me through your filters. And everybody, you can say this with me. It's now a litany. You've heard me say this a lot of times. We see people through our filters. We see each other through our filters. You don't see me. And I give you pieces of me, but they're going through your filters. So you may or may not understand what I'm even saying. I accept this as a fact. I accept this as what is the cost of building relationships, and knowing that you might or might not ever really understand what I'm trying to say, but I try and say it in different ways so that you get a bigger picture of it. And at some point, we start getting less and less filters because we are more familiar with the territory and it's new territory. And we start actually maybe coming to a place where we're communicating clearly one on one. Now, you and I have spent a fair amount of time getting to this point, but most people never even start.
No.
So, how is it that we can communicate clearly no matter what language we're speaking if we don't understand that our intent in our communication is vital, and the other person's ability to understand our intent is based on their ability to see past their own filters? Seems hopeless, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, it does, and you are correct. We all have our own filters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and I've told this story before. I mean, I got a friend that lives on the other side of my wall. We drink coffee 2-3 times a week, right? And we became friends. I lived there for almost 8 months, and then I didn't talk to him when he was outside my house. I talked to him when we ran into each other almost physically in a doorway at Olympic College. He lives on the other side of the wall from me,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no interest in talking to him. But that, again, it's taken me a long time to get used to the idea of talking to people in general because, like most people, I just stay to myself and I don't care what you do on your own time.
Mm-hmm.
Just leave me alone. You leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. Let's call it good. No?
Yeah. And we will never get together that way. We will never fix problems that way. But we feel secure that way until there's no security left.
Yeah. You're absolutely correct.
So let's talk about this morning, because I told you I was going to have the conversation.
Okay.
The last 3 days, I've been giving a homeless lady a ride to the cold weather shelters
Mm-hmm.
and picking her up in the morning and bringing her back. And mostly it's been fine. This morning was not fine. And I don't need to go into the details of it, but I ended up taking 40 minutes to do a 20-minute ride. And the entire ride back was a diatribe about everybody else's fault and how I had lied to her, how everyone had lied to her, how she can't get her needs met, how this, I mean, and this was like 40 minutes. And I know that it's not about me. I know it's her filters. I know she's homeless. I could easily just go, she's crazy, and write it off, dump her, and forget about her. But that wouldn't be me, would it?
No.
So after I cooled down a bit, and yes, it triggered me. Yes, I took it personally. And even with all my litany of myself, it's not about me. Everything. She's not even seeing me. She's seeing a version that she's not even seeing the version of me. She's just going through her head. But then I started thinking about it later, and I started going through this piece. Now she came to us in a I think Bremerton PD called or something, and for the first time I took her down. I'm not sure. But let's be empathetic for a minute and walk through this story. So I took her to a cold weather shelter, and she had no idea they existed. She doesn't have a phone. She didn't know that she could do this. She'd been living on the streets. I took her to the shelter, and they wanted to lock her stuff into the secure room with everybody else's stuff and give her a tag, and she just about came unglued. And I talked her down, and she stayed that night. She got a good night's sleep. She came back the next day. She told me that they served dinner at 4, and I said I didn't know that. And you should talk to Stephanie because she would know more about that stuff than I do. But I made an arrangement to pick her up at a certain time, and then Stephanie called me and said, "Hey, they do dinners there. Pick her up this time and bring her back." So I did that.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have a history of her going to the shelter 2 nights in a row. One day, one of those 2 nights, they fed her. They fed her.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been living on the streets. You had no idea there were any resources out there. It comes from a police officer, which you've learned to distrust completely, for reasons that they're likely to harass you, move you someplace you don't want to be, or anything else. Suddenly, you're sleeping in a warm bed, and now you have food and sleep. And then this morning, she didn't want to wake up and she didn't want to get up. And then she was aggravated and blaming everybody for lying to her. And I'm sitting here thinking about it, and as I started thinking about it, I said, let me put myself in her spot for a little while. I've been living on the streets. There have been no hope. I don't know where my next meal is going to come from. And now I'm in this shelter, and it may or may not be open the next day. We don't know. By the way, our cold weather shelters open tonight?
I have no information on that. They typically put that information out between 1 and 2 o'clock. So as soon as
Okay.
I will announce.
Okay, good. And apparently, Silverdale Church does a 4 o'clock meal for the homeless community. At least today and yesterday. Those are the only 2 days I know of.
I believe it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, Stephanie had told me, but I'm not, I can't
Okay.
confirm.
Okay. Anyway, so I started thinking about this and realizing that, her reaction that I thought is over the top. And yes, it was extreme. No doubt about that. But as you and I have talked many times before, a person who's lost everything is living on the streets does not easily maintain sanity. At some point, they start listening to the voices in their head and asking why them, why them, why them. And we can go in and we will go into the reasons that this is happening to so many people and why it will continue to happen until we change our way of thinking about people. But people have become very, very damaged. Her attacks on me and the general and the blame is because she just came out of she had one sound sleep in a warm bed. The next night, apparently, there were a lot of the addicts were sharing space with her, and it was loud, and she did not get to sleep as well. And all she really wanted to do when I picked her up was go find some place to sleep. And so she was sleep addled. She's looking. She's angry. She doesn't know what's going to happen next, and she's not able to think rationally. Yeah, she's angry and lashing out. All of us would. Not to that extreme, but all of us would do that.
Yeah, all of us would. But again, look at the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were speaking about, the longer that it goes on, the more extreme those reactions are going to be.
Yeah, exactly so, and it's kind of the point. So when we talk about filters, she had no. I did not exist as a human being to her.
Hmm.
I was the driver, and the person who she thought lied to her because she said that I did not. That I told her that they did not feed people at 4 o'clock. Says I don't know if they do or not. Talk to Stephanie. But that became I was wrong.
Yes.
So okay, I can take that on my shoulders. It's no big deal. But the point here is the further out they go, the less in touch they're going to be. And we have to think about how we can communicate to start bringing them back if they can ever come back.
Yeah.
And the question here is, are we going to just write them off as pointless, like we seem to be doing, and continue to allow the problem to grow as we go down this path? And it is going to grow. It is a growing problem that is, we're not even talking about a possible solution for. We're not even talking about the understanding the cause. What we're talking about is all kinds of things that may do little pieces of it, but will never actually address the whole thing.
Well, I'm a believer in that if you can stabilize the housing, you can build from there. Because the
Yeah,
very first thing is make sure they've got somewhere warm to stay, warm, dry, roof over their head.
it isn't going to get ripped away from them at any time. And that was part of my point about the shelters. The shelters are wonderful things, but they're there when it gets 32 degrees and colder. And it's
Well,
great that people are doing this, but we need to actually have a more permanent solution.
but and now we're looking at come the end of this winter season. I believe if I've heard right, and I've heard it here and on numerous other shows that we've had, Salvation Army is closing down for their overnight shelter.
Mm-hmm.
During the warmer months, they don't offer that. This is a program that they offered during COVID because there was a need during COVID. But now, because there's no pandemic, they don't feel that there's a need because now, I mean, we have a housing crisis, which don't get me wrong, we had a housing crisis before the pandemic, but it's got worse, progressively worse. And that ties to, inflation, recession, all the other things we have going on. So if we can't provide affordable housing to even start this process, what are we doing?
Exactly so. I mean, and we have to look at this in a different way, and that's kind of about the communication and intent. You know, part of intent is viewing a situation in a clear way and defining relationships clearly. And we don't do that for homeless people. We don't even make the reasonable attempt to, we as general people. I'm not, I don't want somebody to come in and just say, hey, I do that all the time. Yeah, there are some people that do, but the majority do not have a clear idea. It's an uncomfortable situation. Too bad for them. And I sometimes wonder if the things that we do that we consider good have been thought out as far as they need to be. Okay, I'm going to take some heat for this. So, somebody must have had a great idea to give homeless people bicycles.
Mhm.
I drive, Rob drives, we all drive. And I can't tell you how many times a month I damn near get T boned, almost hit, have to slam on my brakes for somebody who's riding a bicycle completely irresponsibly into traffic with no attention to anything around them, who are riding on down the middle of back roads with no lights, no reflections, and in the dark hours. Um, I had a guy riding down the Warren Avenue Bridge, just whip right on out into traffic and ride down the middle of the Warren Avenue Bridge and pull off at Park Street and go down Park with a bicycle that was overloaded and didn't apparently have any brakes.
I
So
would,
it was a good idea. Somebody had a good idea. Let's get them transportation so they can get where they need to go. Second thought is, are they responsible and reliable to ride a bicycle?
now, I would ask because we are talking about this and going down the rabbit hole of what happens as you know you go deeper into homelessness. What is the disconnection here? Because we've both seen this too. Again, you speak that we drive. You've got the recklessness on the bicycles. You've got, I mean, I can't tell you how many times a week someone just generally walks out into the road and walks across the road. And I'm not
Kitsap
talking,
Way.
yeah, I'm not even talking about just down there by Salvation Army. I'm talking
Yeah, no.
Kitsap Way by National with an intersection with 5 lanes and cars doing 40, 45 miles an hour and just stroll out diagonally onto the road.
Yep.
What level of disconnection are they at
Yeah,
for that?
I mean, okay, I'm going to be, for the person who's trying to be rational, this is the thought that always goes through my head. If you want to commit suicide, don't do it with anybody else's involvement. Okay? Don't make me or Rob or a police officer or anybody complicit in your death. Because you may be gone, you may not be gone. Keep that in mind too. You may suddenly be in a wheelchair that you weren't in before, or paraplegic, or any other number of things that could be really bad. But if you're gone, we have to live with it.
Yeah.
And that may be selfish on my part, but they have said many times, and I tend to agree, that suicide is one of the most selfish things people do.
Yes. I would agree. I know I can tell you many years ago, and again, this comes back to dating ourselves, but 24 years ago or so, 25 years ago. So I mean, this dates to before my son, and
Uh,
well,
Actually, hold just a second with that thought. I do want to say, if you're having thoughts of suicide, there are suicide hotlines. We will get the number and put it up here for you. Please call those before you do something dramatic. And it is, I understand, as Rob and I've talked, that we live in really, really hard times. And suicide may seem to be a way out. And sometimes it's just you don't know what your options are. So Rob will get a suicide hotline up here for you so you can see it. Don't, but the thing is, don't ever involve somebody else in that decision.
yes.
Sorry, Rob, go back before you had your son.
So before I had my son, and I was at the time driving a tow truck in Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
and when and we'd go into the city, into Detroit and stuff, and pick up cars and everything else. And the very first thing they taught you was do not drive in the right lane. Do not. Do not drive next to the parked cars. Do not drive next to the sidewalk. Do not. Because most of the individuals there were willing to step right off the curb and either I'm done because I got mowed by a giant tow truck with a flatbed on it, or I've just found my payday with their insurance.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you
The
know,
other side of that, if they hit you hard enough, the payday doesn't really matter.
yeah, yes, I agree with you. I do agree with you. So, I don't know. I just don't know, Mark.
Yeah. Well, nobody does. And that's the thing, is we have to figure that out together. This is what I keep coming back to, too. And Rob just said it. I don't know. We don't know. And we're pretty smart guys, and we talk a lot, and we talk to a lot of other people, and we bring them in. What we don't have is your opinion. What we don't have is your thinking on this subject and your questions. I mean, and you could be right, you could be wrong, but your input gets us to think about other things than what we know. And in that way, we learn to have real solutions,
Yep,
if that makes sense.
yep, it does. It really does.
So, communication, intent. Um, the language is actually less important than the intent of the communication. And what we have to do is find a way to communicate that we can all agree on. Whenever you read science fiction, and I've read a bit, there always seems to be a universal translator or a common language.
And you keep coming back to Gene Roddenberry with my universal translator.
Well, he's not the only one that had that. I mean, Douglas Adams
Yeah.
has had the fish that you put in your ear, the babble fish from
Yeah.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. And hold on for one moment. On the screen, you will see the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number. It is 988. You can text or call or chat on that number.
Okay, cool. Anyway, a lot of people have the universal translator, or frequently in a lot of the books they had a universal language that was accepted, so that you had a common thread that everyone spoke and didn't have to depend on dialect and or cultural intakes on the language.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we would ever get there here, but understanding that when we talk to each other, we are frequently not speaking the same language, even though it sounds like we are.
Yes.
And we have issues with security. We have issues with understanding. We cause a lot of conflict because we assume we're speaking the same language. And we take things personally that we probably shouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people's actions or the way they deal with you really is not about you at all.
Nope.
I could be having the world's worst day, and Mark says that one thing, and that was the straw. That was it. So Mark's going to catch that barrage of everything I had all day, and none of it has anything to do with Mark. It is all about Rob.
Yep. And then that's when Mark goes to the filing cabinet, pulls out the bottle of tequila, pours a shot, and hands it to Rob.
Exactly. So we can cope. And coping, I do not advocate coping with alcohol.
No. Nor do I. And as most people who know me know, that I don't really drink once in a very, very long while. But that's never been my coping mechanism. But for me, and with my training, when somebody unloads on me, I understand that it's not about me. This morning, when I got unloaded on, it's not about me. Doesn't mean that I don't feel the impact of it. We all do. It's that, I mean, we're human. We're going to feel it. But if you can step back and go, this isn't about me, something's going on with Rob. And therefore, let me step back and take the responsibility to de escalate the situation and get the other person to a space where we can get to some commonality.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's just giving them a shot of tequila, getting them to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, I think it's time for you to have a cup of coffee. Let's go up to the cafe.
Yeah.
And sit down and have some coffee. Tell me what your day's been like. Take the time and connect. See, this is kind of the universal language, the language of compassion, of empathy, of understanding it's not about you. So find out what's up with them. Find out where they're at. I mean, it's not words so much as it is actions, but it gets you to a place where you can sit down and breathe and find commonality.
And that's something I've had to learn over time.
Something all of us have to learn.
Well, yes, I would agree. All of us have to learn it, but I know how I approach the world. I mean, come on, I come from a rough background of, okay, I was in the military. Well, I don't care what your day was like. You're going to do what I say. Right. Literally, I went from that into doing some tow truck driving and then into construction. Well, again, I really don't care what your life was like. You need to do what I say. So to make that shift at the age I did, I mean, because Chi was 5 to start doing this and to have to learn to show. I mean, I felt for people, but to show that compassion, to take that time to learn to communicate, to find out, I mean, you can find out a ton by just sitting down and going, hey, man, let's have a lunch. Or, let's have a cup of coffee, like you said, or, how's your day going?
Yeah.
And be sincere about it. This isn't just a flippant remark like you're walking by, how's your day? No, this is you're sincerely care about what's going on. And you can find that more things will go smoothly, I guess would be the right way.
Yeah.
If you just take a second,
Well,
and it's hard to slow down to take that time.
right, and you're also modeling behavior for them to work with you.
Yes.
So everybody gets a little better if you behave this way.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we have these assumptions. And last week, I talked about assumptions and acceptance. We have these assumptions about how to behave with employees and how to behave with each other and how to behave with the opposite sex that are just asinine and insane. And we accept these as truths. And I'll give an example of this. Okay, I'm a part of an online community. I've been a part of an online community for most of a decade now. And in this online community, almost every one of the women that I talk to think that I'm hitting on them because I'm polite.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it took and because in the community, 90% of the time, that would be a true experience. When
Yeah.
I explain to them that friendship is far more important to me than whatever the outcome of the flirting would be, they don't believe me for a long time, and then they suddenly do. And so I end up with these relationships with these people that are built on trust when they realize that when I say something, it's what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and that I respect them. And when I say, "What's up with you, man? Tell me what's going on in your life," I actually want to know. And I got to tell you, that's a real biatch because you're sitting there typing it all out as opposed to talking to somebody.
Yeah.
But basically, in a situation where these people have been abused, harassed, and are just in a space where every guy is only interested in one thing, they're really happy to have somebody who actually respects them and have a conversation with them. And I've
I know.
had some really rich discussions because of that.
That's the thing, though. This is something. I mean, and this is across all scales. One, I abhor social media. I mean, here we are doing a podcast and so on and so forth, but Facebook, Twitter, that kind of stuff. I'm not a huge fan because it literally is, afforded you to be able to hide behind a screen and pretty much be,
Be an asshole.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'll
And
say it.
that's either way. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, male, female, doesn't matter. Um, I also find that common decency, things I grew up with, things you grew up with, and yes, there is a difference in our age of a little better than a decade.
Hmm.
Um, but things that I grew up with that my dad taught me, and how I'm supposed to act, and how you should treat other people, be it I don't care which sex, okay,
Yep.
but other people in general,
Other people, period.
yeah, other people, period, you know, and then other things that, I mean, there are things that I do for my wife that I've done since the day I met her, you know, because those are things I was taught, and that got lost somewhere in there. Now, I would say my son does the same things because he saw how I treated his mom. So it becomes that learned behavior thing. But in general, you don't see that kind of decency between people anymore.
So, and we're going to actually go into this in a few episodes. We're going to be talking about social contracts and what we assume they are and what they really are and how we need to build a new one. I've touched on it before, but we're going to spend an entire episode on that.
Okay.
Um, because we have lost so much.
Hmm.
I look back, and Rob mentioned I'm a little older than him, but I'm 65 years old, and I remember so many things, and I don't remember. I remember so many things that aren't around anymore, that just don't exist. And none of it is because it's a good thing to have gone away. It's just that we've lost our social grace, we've lost our self respect, we've lost our respect for others. Um, we have sold everything to the mighty dollar.
Yep.
And I'll give you one for you, because you came from construction and the background you came from.
Hmm.
If you go out and buy a drill today, power cord or cordless drill today,
Hmm.
is it anywhere near as good as one you bought 10, 15 years ago?
Um, it depends. I would tell you that most of, like, if it's a cordless drill, yeah, those are disposable, dime a dozen. 15 years ago, I wouldn't have said dime a dozen, you
Yeah,
know, because I mean, you'd go out and you'd buy one, and you could beat that thing to death and it keep running.
yep,
Nowadays, not the
yeah.
case.
Everything is disposable because they want you to buy more of it.
Yes, and
So,
that's part of capitalism and consumerism.
so
But
let's talk about the second half of that. So you dispose of it, and what happens? It goes into landfill, right?
yes,
The cabling and the wire wrap that goes into landfill, unless some enterprising person strips it open and pulls all the copper out, which could happen, but it depends on what the value of it is at any given moment. But so we end up with a waste stream. Now in Europe, I know that people hate it when I talk about Europe because it's like somebody other than the U.S. Europe actually is implementing laws that are forcing corporations to deal with their waste, and they're developing real recycling because the corporations are on line to have to do it.
now is this as a European Union or is this
Yes,
by country?
this is by European Union, and the countries are implementing it as they need to.
Okay, I
So,
asked that question because if it's European Union, that's akin to the United States
yep,
versus state by state, which would be
yep.
country by country to them.
Generally, when I'm talking about Europe, I'm talking about the EU and the
Oh,
and their whole contract agreement.
okay.
They take environmentalism far more seriously than we do, and we don't hold corporations accountable for anything.
No.
And waste is a huge problem, especially since now we're shipping our waste to China and Asia, and they keep coming back to us saying, "Nope, we're not going to take this anymore. Nope, we're not going to take this anymore." We don't have a waste solution because we don't have a recycling solution. So
Uh-huh.
this may not seem like a communication, but I'm going through a thread of thinking here,
Yeah,
and how we communicate informs how we look at a situation.
yeah. Hmm.
So we have greater waste because the things we're buying work less long, and we have to buy more of them. None of the pieces of these are generally recycled, and so the pieces are getting shipped to China. Maybe they're recycled, maybe they're not recycled. At some point, China will probably say we don't want these anymore. We're not dealing with it. We bury things, we put in the ground. We're acting like the resources that we use have no value. They're commodities because the corporations look at them as commodities. It's not part of their costs in any way, shape, or form. So they can sell it and forget about it. Except as human beings, we can't forget about it because those resources in those landfills that are
Yeah.
being dumped wherever they're being dumped are our future, and it's our children's future. So this planned obsolescence thing has to stop.
Yeah.
How do we do it? Because we have to communicate with each other and agree that that's a good thing, which means we have to understand what the effect is of not doing it.
I I know this is going to be completely off topic, but kind of on topic.
Okay.
Uh, I had heard the other day. I was actually checking out different just different things on YouTube. But I know you've spoke about food for all and those kind of things. And a statement I heard is that somebody like Jeff Bezos could probably solve the food problem on this planet with the amount of money he has, or at least make it better.
Um, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I no, no. I'm trying to figure out how to answer that because it's a two-part question.
Mhm.
Money could resolve some of the issues, but it would have to be invested in changing our culture and our thinking about food.
I
Um,
definitely agreed that.
and one of the things we have to do is, and this is my personal opinion, but I will defend it. We have to end industrial agriculture. We have to end it once and for all. We have to stop thinking about food as a centralized commodity being shipped out. We have to start growing food locally and supplying locally. And yeah, it'll be a bit more expensive, but it'll also be healthier and you'll need less of it and we'll be less obese because it's the only way we're going to come back to some kind of a natural balance in the food that we eat. And so money will be important in developing that change, but it won't be as important as developing the mindset to make that change.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I
the thing about communication is people take simple answers.
Yeah.
And they did. Let me throw this comment out, and then everybody wraps around the comment, but the comment doesn't talk about everything underneath it.
No, I agree with that, and that literally, I know that I sprung this on you,
Yeah.
but also something that was in my head because I actually did want to speak to you about it, and well, here we are right now, face to face. So,
Yep. Well, apparently, Bill Gates is trying to do some of that. I keep getting attacked because of or not attacked, but I keep getting challenged about Bill Gates being evil because he's buying up all this farmland and da 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 da. Da. And I said, you know, it's nice that you get the meme from YouTube or on Facebook or something, but have you actually done any research to find out what he's doing with that?
yeah,
If it's evil at all, or what the plans are overall, and how that's going to be approached. My concern is the little bit of research I have done is showing that it's the same thinking, same industrial thinking that we have, and I think we need to have a change in that. But I don't know. I've done very little research into it, but I do know that we have to change our mind. We have to change our mind collectively.
yeah, yeah, and I can't answer questions on the Bill Gates thing. That is something I actually would like to research because I would like to know what he's doing because I do know he's buying land, but I don't know that there's an evil empire nefarious version of that or not. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
and
obviously,
there's no such thing as an evil empire. There's just limited points of view.
yeah, I would agree.
I mean, none of these corporations are evil. There's no evil villain going whoa ha, 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 there. There's nobody that smart. Okay, even Bill Gates is not that smart, but he is following a path trying to solve problems, and he's using his money. He's using his money to do it. Okay, is it going to be effective? Is it not going to be effective? I don't know. I haven't done the research on it. It would be good to do the research, and maybe um, we can reach out to the Gates Foundation and ask them to send somebody onto our program to talk about what Bill Gates is doing for food.
Yeah, that may be a very excellent idea. Mark, I need to break in for 1 second here.
Okay,
So I can make the announcement that the severe weather shelters are open tonight.
thank
They're
you.
open at the locations in Poulsbo at the Gateway Church, Kingston, Silverdale at the Silverdale Methodist Church, and Port Orchard at the Port Orchard Methodist Church. If you need a ride, please either contact 211, which will connect you to us at G2 so we can get you there for free, or call our number, which is 360 373 3000. And I will put that up on the ticker on the bottom of the screen right now.
There
Okay.
you go.
Sorry about that, sir.
Oh, no problem. I think that's a very important announcement. And so I will pursue trying to get somebody from the Gates Foundation to join us on Restream
Okay.
and for the tipping points and puzzle pieces, so we can talk about what their plans are. And I think that they would appreciate somebody reaching out to them and saying, we get a lot of people with opinions about what you guys are doing. What are you
Mhm.
guys doing?
Hey, come on down. Let's have a talk. Let it
Yeah.
clue what you're doing. You know.
Yeah, because I don't believe in evil. I don't think that anybody does anything out of evil. I think they do it because their understanding of the situation is far better than mine or flawed.
Well, I would say that even the villain is the hero of his own story, Mark.
Always. But I don't tend to think of villains so
Yeah.
much as I think of machines. I
Okay.
think the problem is that we have a machine that does what it does, and until we reprogram it, it's going to continue to do things that are going to keep chomping people up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, communicating together at the Kids Up Resiliency Project, it's all about reprogramming,
Hmm.
reprogramming ourselves so we can reprogram culture,
Yep.
which will then reprogram the corporations, which will reprogram our ability to deal with things like racism, like sexism, like income inequality, because we'll start treating people and thinking of people universally as valuable.
Yeah.
And so that's it. By the way, Saturday is the start of the next um, workshop series.
Okay.
And the first one is all going to be about perspective, how to look at things differently. So if you're feeling trapped, you're feeling like your head is not wrapped around things, you feel angry, and you don't like the way things are, come down to the workshop and let's work through figuring out how to change your perspective so that you don't feel trapped. And then let's start going through the other workshops and giving you the tools to change the environment around you.
Well, Mark, would you like to tell people where the workshop is and the time?
It is going to be at noon. Let's see, noon. No, 12:30. It's going to be 12:30 on Saturday at the Fifth Street Library in downtown Bremerton.
Okay. Well, we're coming up really close on our hour here, man.
Yes, we
So,
are.
I would impart the people with communicate, learn to talk to each other, learn to take the time, show some compassion, slow
Learn to
down,
listen. Yep.
learn to listen, and you'll find that you can find solutions and work together with just about anything.
Mhm.
And so, anything else you'd like to say, Mister Boatwright Frost?
Um, be kind to each other, or to quote Bill and Ted, be excellent
I would agree.
and party on.
That too. All right. Well, for Mark Boatwright Frost, I'm Rob Dent, and this has been Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. And I'll see you in about a half hour for the Homelessness and Housing Coalition meeting. Have a good day.